Hello and welcome. We're going to go ahead and play a Sega Genesis game for this video. And if you haven't heard, Nintendo, huge lawsuit against ROM websites, and pretty scary, a lot making headlines all over the place. And I want to take a minute in this video, or probably more than a minute, and talk about what happened, what are some things that I don't think a lot of people are pointing out about it, and then what you could do as a retro gamer, as a person, as a consumer, about the situation. So, first off, summary. Nintendo goes after these ROM websites who have backups of some of these classic Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and other games. And it just coincidentally happens to happen when Nintendo's on this, mini console release, one after the next. We had the NES Classic, SNES Classic. We're probably seeing Nintendo 64 Classic soon. And so to me, it's just the timing seems a little weird because especially, for the last decade or so or more, they've kind of ignored it or haven't made such a big effort as they recently had. And so that's making headlines, which is people like, oh man, Nintendo's got this vendetta out for all this stuff. This is the end of an era. And I'm just reading these headlines like, oh God, this is like people fear-mongering, right? It's like, any headline, ROM's gone forever, going after the, just whatever the craziest titles you've ever seen are in the news right now. And also on social media too, a lot of people are talking about it. And so the first thing I would point out would be that these type of news articles, these type of titles, and I probably did it in this title here, because it works, right? If you have something negative, something like, eye-catching, people click, right? It feeds into that instant gratification of like, whoa, what's going on? Curiosity, all sorts of other things, dopamine. And so that would be my first point about all this, is that you're probably hearing a lot about this right now because it's so fear-based. And with that, I would say I'm not trying to be like super optimistic, like, yeah, everyone, it's actually all right. It's not all right. It's definitely not all right. So I'm not trying to be here and sit all optimistic and everything else, but I'm just saying, make sure you're reading the facts and seeing the whole story, right? Because I think it's easy to get into this is the end of the era, ROMs are gone, period. I just got my blank hardware, now I can no longer get backups for it. And the truth is that that's not the case. What is the case though, and what I think really sucks about it, is this. People who tend to be into retro gaming, ROMs, etc., they'll often collect the original hardware as well as secondary hardware as well. Maybe they'll play on the secondary hardware and then collect the other, vice versa. Whatever the case, you got a little flavor of everything. And what sucks about it is that Nintendo, although they are releasing these mini systems, they're not fully capable of, wow, that was a bad catch. They're not fully capable of playing all the original games. The NES Classic and the SNES Classic are around 20 or 40, between 20 and 40 games respectively each. And, each of them had over 700 titles. So what happens if you want to play the other 650? You have to go and buy the original hardware, go on eBay, go on the secondary market, and get it. And so I think that's where the big disconnect is. It's like, okay, Nintendo, that's fine. If you want to change your business model and go back into retro games, maybe you should have a download where you can go and download these games. And maybe that's what they're doing with Nintendo Direct. So if they do that, I might have a little more sympathy for Nintendo. But I think they're still going to have a hard time because there's, other licensing and software companies behind some of these titles. So that's to be continued. But either the case, as we sit now, Nintendo, it looks really bad. It looks like Nintendo's just after profits. And this looks really bad to me because this is my argument for Nintendo. Retro gamers are typically heavy power users. These are the users playing 2+ hours daily. They're on the forums. They're the ones that go to family parties and things like that, and they're talking about new releases, what's going on. Have you tried the VR? Have you tried the whatever is the latest game, the latest hardware? They're the ones using it. And so when Nintendo goes after ROMs, they're going after that group of people. And in my opinion, these people, these hardcore gamers, whether they emulate or not, they're probably going to still buy the original hardware. The case in point is that, I think I saw a release on numbers that the NES and SNES Classic in certain months outsold like the PlayStation and the Xbox, which is like crazy to think. And so when I look at those numbers and the fact that they're not supporting all the ROMs. It's like this big company that has no heart, that all they care about is your dollar, is going after all this stuff. And so for those reasons, it does really suck by Nintendo, and that's going to be my last point, which I'll get to in a second. So that's the situation, and I don't blame these ROM sites for shutting down, because Nintendo has probably a dozen full-time lawyers. They don't want to have to deal with that. And so it is this big bully right now that's handling it, and so it just sucks to me that they're not supporting the ROMs. At least Sega, you can go on a smartphone and download like Sega Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 2, and 3. Those are available through download. And that's where it sucks that what Nintendo's doing. Something else I'd like to bring up, which is something actually positive that has come out of all this. Now, here we are where... What? Here we are talking about this, and as I mentioned, all the headlines say it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here. Originally I was complaining, I was like, let's not give them and eat into the fear, right? But at the same time, it's actually been really beneficial to me. I've seen way more activity in the forums because of this. So, as some of you might say, like, oh, this is really bad for emulation. It's the end of an era. We're going to see less support for, X, Y, and Z hardware. I don't think so. If anything, I don't own any of these companies, and I don't want to name any companies or websites because, I don't want to add any fuel to this fire. But, Nintendo is adding fuel to the fire in the opposite way, in that people are now making it their mission to preserve retro games, right? They're not going to let Nintendo all of a sudden take it and run with it, right? There's plenty of organizations and groups and websites that are dedicated to the preservation of ROMs and emulation and all sorts of things. So something I might add to all that is now all of a sudden you probably have a surge in sales. I'm sure we're seeing a huge surge in everything from hardware to all across, anything that trickles into that, adapters, controllers, whatever. So if anything, it's stimulating the market. So if anything, I can thank Nintendo for that they're actually doing that. And I don't think a lot of people are looking at it from that perspective. Because, for example, in some of the groups I look at or forums I look at, there's way more activity on this topic than I've seen in a lot of other topics in the past. So to me, that's awesome. That's really, really cool. And I think a lot of people are ignoring that. They're just focusing on the gloom and the doom part of all this. And then lastly, I want to finish off with, I have to hold something for this one, so I'm going to get off the controller, which is this right here. We got a dollar, we got a peso, we got a euro. Whatever your currency is, talk is cheap in my mind, right? And so if you really have a problem with this, do your research on it, make up your mind whether you're angry at Nintendo, maybe you're not. But, voicing your opinion is always great. But at the end of the day, if you want change, especially against a company, one of the best things you could do is just don't buy from them. Don't give them your hard-earned dollar. Because if you stop doing that, that's your vote. That's your vote right there. Your vote is your dollars. So the more you support this company, if you don't like it so much, then don't support it. So with that, I leave it to you. What do you guys think? That's what I think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll catch you guys on the next one.